Foster City Council member, and San Mateo County Libraries board member. We're so happy to have you here for this author talk. Now I'd like to go over some housekeeping items before we get started. Your microphone and videos will be turned off for this webinar. We'll start with a conversation with Aarti and Karla share about their books and their experiences, followed by questions from the audience. Please submit your questions in the Q&A found at the bottom of the screen. For those who'd like to access live closed captions for this event, click on the CC icon in Zoom toolbar, then click Show Subtitles. Now on to the presentation. San Mateo County Libraries is excited to host Aarti Namdev Shahani, author of Here We Are, American Dreams, American Nightmares, and Karla Cornejo Villavicencio, author of The Undocumented American, as part of our Equity Author Series, which highlights authors who write about equity in housing, immigration, education, LGBTQIA+ issues. On May 4th, we will take a closer look at immigration locally through a community conversation event with presentation by Immigrant Legal Resources of the County of San Mateo Office of Immigration Services. Aarti Namdev Shahani is a correspondent for NPR based in Silicon Valley and has recently launched Art of Power, a podcast that highlights fascinating people who do big things. Karla Cornejo Villavicencio was a DACA when she decided to write about being undocumented for the first time using her own name. She has written about immigration, music, beauty, and mental illness for the New York Times, The Atlantic, among others. I'm pleased to be here to introduce Aarti and Karla. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sam.
Good to have you. I'll give you the floor.
Karla, do you want to go first?
Sure. It's really nice to see you again. And
Great to see you again, too.
we're representing opposite sides of the coast right now. I'm in Connecticut and it is 9 p.m. here. And you're in California?
I'm in Oakland, California. The sun is setting and shining on my face.
You look beautiful.
Thank you too. Great.
Well, I'm really happy to be able to be doing an event for the public library system here. I was telling Sam earlier that when I moved to the United States when I was around 5 years old, and one of the first things that my dad did, he took me, to Times Square, and he took me to the outside the windows at Bloomingdale's, all those places. But he took me to get my library card at the Brooklyn Public Library. And I remember just coming out with just stacks of books, including books on tape, and they were like those children's books on tape. And I don't remember listening to them, but I remember they came in those little baggies with the book and the tape and the little hangers. And I really loved them. And every weekend from the time that we eventually moved to Queens, but it was just like a border neighborhood. And we went to the public library as a family every weekend until the pandemic. And one of the first things I did when I got my first check for my first book advance was become a patron of the Queens Public Library. They are not interested in me. My local branch is not interested in me doing an event for them. I was like, hey, I'm a local hero. And they're like, we would rather have just, the local flamenco group, But
that sounds really Queens. I'm from Queens as well.
So Aarti, do you have any experience to share with us about the library? What role it played on making you a whenever, right? Or did you have any influence?
Sure. Well, I'll share my library stories too. From Queens Public Library, I came to the US as a toddler with my family. We came on tourist visas, which we'd overstayed. And I grew up in Flushing, Queens, zip code 11355, which was at the time of my childhood, the most diverse tract of land in America, so possibly on earth. And Flushing's main library, it used to be like this little rinky dinky kind of building, but by my standard, my family standards, still really nice. Like it looked kind of like a home. Totally remember the books on tape, but what I remember more was like the library was the place that would have a working fan or air conditioner. And so we'd go to hang out to cool off. And you know, I hate to admit it, but I'm just going to be real. Like I wasn't much of a reader, like a voracious reader, until I'd say I was a young adult. I grew up with 13 hours of TV a day. And so, you know, like you can ask me anything about 1980 sitcoms. I mean, I really know. But books that I was much later to them, and therefore actually really surprised to find that I was a writer. I didn't realize that was in me, because in my head, a writer is somebody who can quote, you know, like a lot of dead white men to you. Like that's sort of what I assumed a writer was. And to realize that that kind of sprung from me was surprising. And the other thing about the library, I mean, we did absolutely borrow plenty of books. I got into a bit of YA, and I remember the fees hit us. Those libraries, we were never good at returning anything on time. And so I feel like I've been a patron of the library since childhood for that reason.
You know, that's funny. You know, the air conditioning thing is very real, I think, for immigrant families. We went to the Met, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, New York, primarily for the air conditioning in the summers. For, you know, a long time, it was like we had weekends, we had long weekends, and it was really hot, and we did not have AC. Or if we did, we had like one just really janky air conditioning unit for like this apartment, and we would just like spend the day at the Met because there was a lot. They're not going to kick you out. You just walk through it, and you know, it's like, I guess we were really, my parents were really fond of like passive environments where you just absorb information. So you're like, I recognize that painting, and you're also getting cooled down. It's the library that was closest to us. There was a librarian there who was a member of our church, and she was like a bit of an auntie figure. Mm-hmm. So we definitely got special treatment at our local library. I don't know if I can legally admit this or if you have jurisdiction over the Queen's Library, but we had a special privileged access to books. Sometimes we had our fees waived.
Oh.
It was, I hope no one goes to federal jail for this, but it was really great. But, you know, I was a big reader when I was a kid, but the older I got, the more I became more and more disturbed by human nature. And I just did not want to read about conflict in novels primarily. Like I'd like reading nonfiction, but I just read novels voraciously as a child. But when I became an adult, I became much more interested in television and became much more interested in songwriting and in other forms of writing that told stories, especially comedy. And I felt like, I think we had like reverse trajectories where like I became really interested in like late night and in stand-up. And that became more something that I like really looked at and studied and really enjoyed, and not novels as much as I did when I was a kid.
Was there something that you read that had turned you off from novels, or was there something happening in real life? I'm sorry, I have to, now to me, I'm just like in a conversation with you and like, hey folks, here with us.
You know, I just became I settled more comfortably into, I think my like trauma patterns where I just am very sensitive to conflict. And so what I'll do is like, if I watch a movie I will need to, like, I will seek out all the spoilers, and I will need to know what all the resolutions are and what the spoilers and what the what like, I need to know everything. When I watched Breaking Bad, I knew every single detail of what was going to happen, and then I watched it for the dialogue, the artistry, all of that. I did not want to be surprised, because that sends me into fight or flight. I remember John Franzen is a friend, but when he wasn't a friend, and I was just a child, I read the corrections on the Metro North, and it sent me into such a panic that I couldn't finish it. And I put the novel outside. I had just picked it up from the Strand on a visit to New York. And I put it out on the outside of my apartment in New Haven. And I was like, someone take it. I can't have it in my house. It was just so overwhelming for me. And I am better about that now, but it's still something where, like, I don't seek out aesthetic representations of human beings being awful. I can't.
Right. That's like so the opposite of how our mass media is incentivized and structured. It's like the exact opposite. You know, like I think about Oprah Winfrey talked about why she got out of the news business and into the talk show business. And she talked about how she could see herself as an anchor falling into the trap of, for example, there would be a shooting. Okay, well, the next one needs to be bigger to hold the attention more. You know, that kind of thing. I do think that kind of sensitivity you're describing, I wouldn't pretend that I have it at that level, but I'm struck by how much I cry and how easily I cry. And I've come to think, I think particularly since I've started taking myself seriously as an author, which is, I mean, for me, certainly a new chapter, no pun intended, and maybe for you too, you know, before, how much I cried really annoyed me. It's like, God, Aarti, get a grip. And I feel like now it's become this gift because I just feel like, oh, my emotional pores are open in a way that they get closed off for a lot of adults. And maybe that's a superpower or something. You know, like I feel I'm relating now to that, the kind of unbridled emotions differently from how I used to.
That's really inspiring, I guess. I was just telling, I like go around peddling this question like to my psychiatrist and to various editors. And I'm like, can you break this down? How much of my sensitivity to pain is that I'm an empathetic person? Mm-hmm. How much of it is like a pathological sensitivity related to mental illness? And how much of it is like artistic temperament and like attention to detail, and the fact that I can imagine myself in other people's shoes and can like imagine myself as, you know, as like, you know, that it, think about what it's like to be an animal. Sometimes I'm like, does it humiliate my dog to be on 4 paws all the time? And like that will distress me. I'm like, does he get upset that I'm on 2 feet and that he's on 4 paws? Like, does that distress him?
Or does he feel bad for you?
Maybe, but I immediately go to the pain. I'm immediately like, he is humiliated. And he was like, I am not qualified to answer this question. I'm like, yes, you are. You know, artists, you can tell me if other artists are this way, but you're saying that, you know, maybe it's, yeah, your emotional pores are just more open, and some people, they close it off.
Well, you know, did you ever watch Nanette, the stand-up from Hannah?
My partner has been trying to get me to watch it.
So she makes it, I'm like, is it Hannah Goolsby or Gatsby? I'm so sorry. Gatsby, thank you. Who's become one of my favorite comedians because it's like, she talks about, you know, laughing through your pain. It really is a survival strategy. It really works. But there's also this way that at some point laughing at things diminishes the truly horrific fact of what is happening. And so I just love how she talks about her entry point into comedy as a place to kind of deny truly horrific things, and now she needed to own it. So she had a really conflicted relationship with comedy for what it does and what it does in opposite directions. But, you know, she talked a lot about the way we have this notion in society of creativity being linked to insanity and suffering, and this very romantic ideal about the kind of tumultuous inner life of the artist. And she had made this very interesting point about Van Gogh. I believe it was Van Gogh, that he had a sister or sister-in-law who visited him and made sure that his works were shared with the world. So his conduit to the rest of us was not purely the pain of his being, but it was a loved one surrounding him and being a bridge to others. And, you know, I just feel like our society has so many capitalist reasons to want to like romanticize insanity and suffering. And I can't really buy all of it, but I will say, just speaking from purely personal experience, I wrote my first book in 2019, practically the whole thing in that year. And it fundamentally changed my relationship to what I thought was my hypersensitivity. Just changed it, you know.
I think I'll check out that special. I've been a little resistant to check it out.
I think your partner's right. It's good.
Well, great. Thank you both for sharing that. Very insightful. And Karla, for the AC, you're not alone. I found myself many times, among other things, is going to the library when it's pretty hot here, and I'm seeing some of the audience in the chat room do that as well. So we are in the same company, I guess. But my next question, maybe I'll go with Aarti first, is why did you decide to become a writer?
So I decided to write a book before I realized I was a writer. It happened in that order. And for me, what was happening, I mean, I'll make it a long story short. I was at a point in my career, I've had, you could say, two careers before authoring. I was in my 20s, a community activist in New York City, my hometown. I was a child who grew up post 9/11, and I'd started a nonprofit for immigrants who were being deported, with my dad and uncle among those who were being deported. And, you know, I spent more than a decade of my life fighting to keep my family together in this country. When I pivoted into journalism, I was 31 years old. Journalism was my second career. I had really burned out from my sort of post 9/11 coming of age. And I decided as a journalist that I wanted to be a business correspondent in Silicon Valley, because that was in some ways as far away from home as possible. And I just wanted to be as far away from home as possible. And then here's how life is cyclical is, okay, I get as far away from home as possible, and I am becoming what I call the Indian IT lady on the radio, right? Like you would hear me, let's say you woke up in the morning and you turn on Morning Edition, and there's Aarti Shahani speaking with Steve Inskeep about the latest mass mega breach. And I would literally be telling Americans, okay, it's time to reset your password, and it should not be password, right? Like that was my voice. Yeah. And I kind of felt like, what have you done to yourself, girl? And now that, listen, I think that frankly, you know, business journalism is really important. Covering Silicon Valley is really important. I mean, there's a lot of power concentrated here. I learned so much. I feel like just through journalism, I basically got like a very top tier MBA and understood so many things I wouldn't have understood before. But it's like, all right, I'm in a situation where I have a megaphone. I can speak to millions of people, and I'm speaking with maybe 50% of my voice. That like tragic irony. And this one thing bothered me a lot. The thing that bothered me a lot is my sources who I would interview in business, my colleagues at NPR, people I would meet at live events, they just kind of assumed, oh, our Indian IT lady, she must come from a family of, you know, doctors and engineers and those good immigrants, those model minorities. And I just wanted people to know, I didn't want to participate in the whitewashing of my identity. Like I wanted people to understand, actually, you know, you can make some sort of myth about this model immigrant, and here's the actual backstory that involved being very poor, being undocumented, getting papers, then dealing with an arrest that basically tore apart my home, destroyed my father's livelihood, had me drop out of college, like all those things. I wanted people to know that. And the need for people to know that, for me, it was intensely personal and visceral. And the image, I've shared this image before, but it's truly applicable. It's not a talking point. I'm just being honest. I felt like I was one of those cassette players where there was a tape inside and it was stuck. Like it was supposed to be playing, but it was on pause. And I didn't understand why I was achieving quote unquote success, but I felt like I couldn't move. And I think that at that point, just feeling so stuck with myself, some instinct in me said, oh, you've got to tell your story. This will help you to be unstuck. And so the way that I started to approach it is, because I'm in journalism, it's adjacent to the world of literature, right? We could afford to read more books when we report, I'll tell you that. But it is adjacent. And I then, went through the sort of the mechanics of find an agent, start writing proposal. But what I found when I was writing my proposal was, I couldn't believe what I was writing. I was surprised at what was coming out on the page. I had never cried so much in my entire life as I cried when writing that book. Like I couldn't believe how much it was coming out. But at the same time, I was pushing out, and this is actually in part through voice transcription. I love using transcribe features on my phone. I push out 4,000 or 5,000 words a day and just push and push and push just by, and so what I'm trying to explain here is that for me, it happened a little bit in reverse. I didn't think I'm a writer and I want to write a book. I felt I'm struggling to get through my life. I feel stuck. Oh, maybe the book will help me feel unstuck.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I read not the entire book. I read as much as I could in a short period of time. It is really fascinating, and the story is compelling. And I could imagine probably during the process while interviewing your mom, you learned so much also that you did not know before. It's really fascinating story in the book. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah.
Karla, would you mind going into why did you decide to become a writer?
Sure. I had also a an inverse experience in that I read at some point. I read in the New Yorker once, like a long time ago when I was in high school, that like Jackson Pollock had decided that he wanted to be an artist and had like didn't choose a medium, and then he like tried a bunch of things that he was bad at, and then he settled on painting. And I had I didn't really think about careers because at first I was too young, and then I wanted to, when I was like really little, all I wanted was acrylic nails, because like the career, the most glamorous thing to me was like the ladies that the cashiers who had the acrylic nails and the noise it made on the, and I just used to, like, that is all I pretended that I was. All of my games was I just pretended I was a cashier. And it was because I wanted the acrylic nails. And then when I was a little bit older, I learned I was undocumented, and I was like, I didn't feel like I could really plan for a career. So I was just really living in like really short-term increments. And I was just like, I felt like I had to go to college and I had to do really well academically, but I didn't, I couldn't really think about having a job. I really felt like I was gonna have to, I didn't want to have to think about what I had to do after college. I didn't even know if I could do college. So I wrote because I just started writing as a teenager because I was good at it and because it got me attention. And I got a lot of positive reinforcement, and because it allowed me to see a lot of like theater and concerts for free in New York. And so I reviewed them. And then I started getting clips. I started getting like experience, and was able to, always lacked a lot of inhibition regarding in certain areas. And so like I would pitch places, and then once I started placing things, I just kept doing it because it gave me a really nice high. And for someone who didn't do drugs, it was fantastic. Sometimes what I would do is like, if I was feeling sad, I would send off a pitch, and that would give me just like a boost of confidence. And if it was accepted, it was even better. I mean, it got to a point where I mean, the only thing that would really make me feel happy was sending pitches and having them accepted. And it wasn't even, I loved the feeling of having written a good sentence, but it wasn't the act of writing that I loved. It wasn't, I like never went to literary parties, or this was the time in New York City. Aarti, I don't know if you remember, like when N+1 was having all those parties for the interns, and it was just like a moment for like Gawker and everything. I never went to that. I never ever did. I just really like sending pitches. And
Not about the lifestyle, not about the lifestyle.
but not even about the right. It was like, I liked the validation, you know? And then at some point it had to, you know, you talk about getting stuck. So, I mean, I wrote because I needed, and then it became a career, you know, because I was like, I needed something that I was good at and that I could make money doing, and this fit. I tried majoring in psychology in college. That did not work. I had a microfinance internship in college. That was a bad idea. I worked as an assistant for someone in publishing. I deleted her entire sent folder. Like, oh, wow. I just needed to be an artist. I needed to be an artist. So this is what I had to do. But, you know, I did become stuck at some point, because when I was a kid, my dream was to write for the New Yorker, or to any kind of association with the New Yorker. And that started off, I think a lot of immigrants probably have like some institution or some like visual of what success looks like. And for me, it was like, I went on the L train and I saw white people reading the New Yorker. And I was like, what is this? And then I read the New Yorker and I was like, this is America. And then I started stealing copies of the New Yorker. So many crimes admitted here, from my high school. And then my dad got me a subscription. I think we might've paid in it with a money order. And I was like, this is how I'll know I will have made it. It was like my Great Gatsby thing. If I work for the New Yorker. I interviewed as a fact checker for the New Yorker when I was on DACA. Did not go well. I memorized the heads of state of every fucking country on earth. Did not go well. And then I got a call from David Remnick last year, and I felt like the earth, like everything shattered. I felt so sad. I felt like everything was meaningless, because I had achieved, like, again, like the very small Great Gatsby thing. And I didn't have a dream beyond that. That's what I wanted to do, and I had done it, and it didn't solve anything. It didn't solve anything for my parents. It didn't change my life. It didn't make me happy. It did not change anything. It was just another pitch. I mean, it wasn't a pitch. It was just another essay that I'd placed. And so that was a moment of reckoning. And I had to do had to make a lot of changes in my life after that.
I just want to say this because it relates. I mean, it's such a relatable human experience, and it's like the punchline we always seem to forget is like, when you arrive at that thing, whatever that thing is, you're still yourself, and most of your life is still what it is. And, you know, like I guess from the podcast that we've just launched that I'm hosting, it's called Art of Power. Every week I interview a fascinating human who's done a big thing. And we talk about the big thing and how it's changed them. And inevitably, people talk about the anxiety, the sense of being lost, after the initial temporary high, the kind of emotions you're describing that come at that moment of arrival. You know, it's really it's so human.
We never learn. We see these stories all the time and we never learn.
Yeah.
We're like, once I lose those 20 pounds, everything will be okay. But now my new dream is once I grow out my nails, everything will be solved.
I call it my COVID-19. That's what I've gained in this time. But yeah.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Karla. And it's fascinating how much we take for granted when most of us are documented and have the legal paper. And it kind of resonates with me what you shared about the inability to plan and the insecurity. How do you plan for your future while you really don't know what tomorrow will bring? Will you be allowed to stay? Will you have a roof over your head because of your residency status and so forth? So thank you for sharing that. I'm sure a lot of people will look into that and learn more. Those who don't know about DACA and those who don't know about undocumented aliens, residents who are really an integral part of our society, right? We have been here, living here for decades and more, some of them multi-generational, as a matter of fact. So, and they are very law-abiding citizens, contribute to this country in every single way that they can. My last question before we go over to the audience questions is, what are you working on now? Are you working on a book? What's in the future for you, Aarti?
Sure. So I feel like the other thing that my book did, here I have it here. Oh wow, it's very sun exposed. I think it just kind of, I mentioned before, I felt like I was, speaking to millions of people, but with 55% of my voice, like not my actual voice. And I do believe that my first book helped me to get as close to, if not 100%. Like it was like, oh yeah, right, this is me, and I'm going to keep doing that. And I think that what's happened since the book is actually, and one thing, this is sort of an amendment to the bio, is I decided to leave my job as the Silicon Valley correspondent, the Indian IT lady, to pursue projects that felt just more deeply aligned with my voice and my values. And so in addition to this show that I've already talked about, The Art of Power, by the way, I have great news to share. I just learned that I'm interviewing Barack Obama on Tuesday. So I'm very, very happy about that. And I've been our very first guest on Art of Power was actually a woman named Gabby Pacheco, who walked 1,500 miles from Miami to Washington, D.C. in an effort to push Barack Obama, to corner him into enacting DACA. So it was literally 4 students in their early 20s. A lot of people don't know this at all. It's an extraordinary story. 4 students who walked 1,500 miles and literally delivered to the Obama administration a demand that every mainstream leader said was not possible. And they opened the door to the entire possibility of DACA even happening. It was just really, to me, it's one of the greatest human or civil rights victories in modern America. And so anyway, in addition to, you can tell I'm passionate about these interviews I'm doing. In addition to doing that, I am working on my second book, which is fiction. And it's about an alpha female who moves to Silicon Valley and is searching for love. She has antics, very funny antics in modern dating, and she doesn't understand how a history of sexual abuse affects her wiring. And so what I'm hoping to do in the novel is bring through a bit of an sort of modern dating adventure, a kind of new or deeper, insightful conversation in our sort of Me Too era about, what happens in a world where most women have been assaulted. Most women are survivors. Most is not an overstatement. I'm speaking a fact. Most men have not done it themselves. They're not perpetrators. But a lot gets lost in the interaction between men and women. And so the novel will deal with that. yes, I'm excited about that and a few other projects.
We'll look forward to reading it, and I'm sure with the It's Me movement, the Me Too movement now, more spotlight on this issue, and can't wait to read your novel about it. Thank you so much, Karla.
I think congratulations on quitting your job and embarking on projects that excite you. Your guests seem really exciting. I mean, I haven't done anything that impressive. When Barack Obama goes on your show, this is just between you and me, just between you.
Yeah, whisper.
Can you ask him why he chose my book and he put it on his list for 2020, or the book list?
Oh, okay.
I'm curious.
Okay.
I'd like to know. Just, just ask him off camera. Just be like, why'd you take it?
Yeah, if I feel we have time in the interview, because I don't know how militant they're going to be about the time limit, I will absolutely put that on my list. Okay.
I'm just curious. I haven't seen anything, but I'm just curious. But
well, you know, I put your book on my list because it's damn good.
You can also, if that question seems too direct, you can also ask them to pass on a message to President Biden that my mother thinks he's handsome, but she doesn't want to give us a stepfather. So
I thought you were going to deliver like a policy message. That's really funny. That's perfect.
Like, look, we know Joe Biden's handsome, but Karla's mom doesn't want to give her a stepfather. I'm working on fiction too, and it is a young adult novel about a, it's, I don't know if Aarti, this is what's happening to you, but it's like, the more you write it, the more you're like, what is it about? Like it is about a young girl's coming of age in New York City as her dad enters like church sanctuary. But it's mostly about her having lots of crushes, I guess.
Oh, that's perfect.
Most of my time writing about lots of crushes and like reliving teenage traumas. And I'm like, oh yeah, the dad's in the church, like write one page about the dad in the church. And I'm like, back to Timmy, I don't know.
That's so real. I mean, isn't it? Like, that's what I don't know. I feel that your book and my both of our first books, I think we did this. It's like, we are, as these writers, and you know it from the publishing industry, we have an identity, the identity of migrant, that is so hyper politicized. There's this expectation that we are going to speak for the identity, right? That's the expectation. So it's like, you could literally, it's kind of like I was talking to a girlfriend of mine and she's like, yeah, it's like, try writing a Palestinian cookbook. You're never going to be able to get away without talking about Hezbollah. Like it could be a cookbook about Palestine, Palestinian food, but you got to take out a two-state solution because that identity signals so much to a certain class of people. And so I just think that, like, yeah, if you're writing a book where the teenager keeps thinking about her crushes, that sounds very believable. Despite the crazy political whatnot happening all around her, And fun fact, I remember being involved in the 2000 sanctuary movement in New York City, organizing, back when I was a community organizer, organizing churches to take people in shortly after ICE was created. And I can tell you, that's not, I mean, I can think of a couple of kids kind of reminds me of. So.
We're just like, can you just hurry up with the human, like with the human chain outside of the ICE office, because I need to go back to fighting with this boy. It is so true. I mean, I was telling someone that for us who have been undocumented or who are undocumented, the issue is so the way that we experience undocumented, or I think the way I experienced undocumentedness was so much an issue of like bureaucratic obstacles. Like we just need a social security number. We need like healthcare. We need all of these things that are made impossible by not being citizens. But when we are like called illegals, or when we are, the way that illegality is, everyone else sees it the way that we are viewed, the problem is not our status. Like, people don't have a problem with us because of our legal status. It's the way that undocumentedness is racialized. And it's because this wave of immigrant, like, because we're poor, because we're brown, because like the perception is we haven't assimilated, because it's because of that. And so it's like, when we talk about our lives as undocumented people, we're people who have, obstacles going to the hospital or to, but then in every other area of our lives, we're people. But when people see us, they're like, we're the huddling masses. Like that's what they say. And it's like, well, we're talking about different things. You're talking about illegals. I'm talking about like lack of status,
I want to say something about that, because I think it's such an important, like, man, do we have an uphill battle on this. This is not the first or only place where laws are used to assert the interests of the incumbents. Okay, this is not the first or only time where that's happened. And so migration status becomes a safe way to talk about racial fear. We all know it. And I've seen it, I'll give an example of that I remember when my father was taken into deportation, part of my response to fighting to keep my family in this country is I joined this group, this network of basically white soccer moms based in Texas. And I write about this. It was like a really funny sort of civic engagement experience. But this group that was basically many white women married to immigrant men who were now being deported. And the founder happened to be married to a Canadian man who was being deported. And I remember the first time I met this guy, he had like a mullet, he's from Texas, but he's from Canada. And he tells me a story about how he's getting deported. And he's like, how can they deport me? I mean, look at me. I'm as American as they come. And I'm like, man, that is some white privilege. Look at me. My skin tells you I'm American. And just right there. And then those of us, I know people in California whose ancestors built the railroads and they're still being told to go back to where you came from, right? It's racialized. It's a racialized identity. We all know that. And I just, part of what frustrates me is what we ourselves, we as migrants, do to ourselves and each other. Because in the rat race to belong here, we whitewash what it took for us to make it here. Like, don't tell me you didn't cut corners. Sorry, I don't believe you. There's not a single person I believe who has some perfect good immigrant narrative. I don't believe it. And part of what I thought was just so important for us to do is to not make being perfect the cost of belonging. But we also do it to ourselves. I mean, powerful forces do it to us, but like more than anything, I wish we could stop doing it to ourselves.
Thank you both. And if we're going to go over to the audience questions, and this first question is for both of you. I'm going to put my glasses to make sure I read this properly. Who do you want to read your books? Is the intent to enlighten those who know little about immigrants and their plight, or to appeal to immigrants and show them the inner workings so they can work for themselves? Who would like to go first?
I'll go ahead. Primarily, to me, the most important audience is young people who are trying to find their own power in this world. Because the protagonist of my book, little Aarti, was a teenager who saw the world around her falling apart. And she decided to step up and assert herself and be the conduit for her family and fix things that the adults couldn't fix. And so for me, what's really important, that feeling of the adults don't have a clue and things are getting really bad. I mean, a lot of people feel that, and younger people feel that. So I would like my book primarily to, if I had to choose an audience, it's that, but I would hope that a good story can appeal to more than that. So.
Thank you. Karla?
Yeah, I always say, children of immigrants, my audience is, my readers are pretty young. I I think that there's like I have like just an intimacy with that experience. And also there's, I think there's a lot of need for writers like Aarti and me to be able to, with this kind of politics, representational politics, to be able to be making our art, because there are a lot of people who are making art that's very different representationally. And it is really hard to grow up and be young and to try to find refuge in art, whether it's books or movies or TV shows, and to just see a lot of propaganda, a lot of racist propaganda, a lot of stuff that's demeaning and hurtful, or just makes you feel lonely. And so, I definitely want everyone to read my book and to be like, she's brilliant. But I think that what I often find is that when it's young people who encounter it and are like, this, you said exactly what I felt, or I didn't even know that I felt. I mean, that's really rewarding.
Thank you. Next question from the audience. What advice would you give to the youth that are having a hard time writing and finding their voice? What's your go-to coping skill to deal with those hard times when you find yourself lost in a writer's block?
I was just dealing with this. It wasn't quite a writer's block so much as a lot of other issues that resulted in me not being able to write, because I was able to sort of write sentences with syntax, but I did not have access to my voice, and that was very scary. I don't know if anyone has seen the Miyazaki film Kiki's Delivery Service, but it's about a young witch who loses her ability to fly her broom. And it's because she sort of loses her belief in herself. And I sort of lost my ability to fly my broom. I was like, I want to write. I'm ready to write. And my voice, I don't have access to my voice. And so what I did was I really had to disconnect from social media. And then I limited people's access to me, like just people being able to contact me and ruin my day because I'm so sensitive. And then I just got a lot of books that I had read when I was younger that had strong voices and that I remember really loving, whether they were considered like good literature or not, whether they were like, are now considered like problematic, or regardless of what the literary consensus is now. I remember like loving them and loving the voices as a young person, like Salinger. I haven't read Salinger since I was a young person. And, but I just remember the voice just like knocked me out. I remember C.S. Lewis, like the voice knocked me out. You can read a sentence and know who that is. And so I started revisiting all of that. And sometimes I do sort of just forget who I am, I think. It's really hard when you, sometimes I see, Aarti, I don't know if this happens to you, but if you're doing events and stuff, I see like photos of myself, like on posters and stuff. It's hard to see your face so much. You sort of start to see yourself as a product or an object. And so I have to disconnect. And sometimes I'll make like a playlist of music that I used to listen to when I really loved writing and it wasn't like my living, when I like was in high school, and it just connects me back to like a younger version where I was just took a lot of risks and was really bold. And so I guess a lot of it just goes back to like having these artistic like triggers that send me back to like a younger version of myself that was less inhibited.
Mm. Mm.
Thank you.
I'll say, I mean, so much of what you said as advice to writers really resonates with me. And I also feel like there are a couple of things that open up for me. I want to just echo what you said, because I think it's such an important point. The quiet. I do not believe you can unlock your inner voice when you've got so many other voices shouting at you. I don't think it happens. And I think that quiet is vital. And if you're not comfortable with quiet, you got to learn how to be comfortable with quiet.
Thank you very much. Final question. After you get your dream, how do you get to your new definition of the next thing?
I mean, I don't know. I like I said, right now I'm like, growing out my nails, and I'm like, once they're long, I will be like, one of those like girls who like, make some overnight oats every night, and I'm just like, that's my dream. That's what I'm gonna do. But first my nails have to grow out,
That is not what I thought you were gonna say, but okay.
What did you?
I just said overnight oats felt like a really random thing to say for someone growing their nails, but okay.
You know what I mean? It's like I picture someone who has their life together as someone who's like every night they take time aside to make their overnight oats in the mason jar.
Yeah.
And I'm not the person.
It's really an artisanal life.
Yeah, like, 3 months ago, I started an outpatient DBT program, dialectical behavioral therapy, for my borderline personality disorder. And I told my classmates that I was going to make oat milk. I have not made oat milk. I feel like if I ran a presidential campaign on that promise, I would lose re-election. So I think I've stopped. I guess like you, like I'm pursuing projects that I'm passionate about. I've started saying no to things, which is again, I'm in a position of privilege where like my book editor is supporting me, like not financially or anything, but like he's supporting my career. So I feel like some sense of safety. So I don't feel like I have to say yes to every single thing that I get, because some things are really soul sucking and shitty. And they're like, do you want to speak to the saddest immigrant in the world, even though it will destroy 3 years of your life? And I don't have to say yes to that anymore. I can be like, no, I would rather work on my novel. And so the goals that I'm setting for myself are really, I'm trying to be nice to myself and trying to find out who I am outside of someone who feels good when they accomplish things. So that is why I'm like, I'm trying these ballet beautiful classes, because I'm not someone who works out. And I'm like, I like this, I'm like, I guess I like tulips, it's like very small human things where those are my goals, like very small human things, because after a lifetime of just, like you say, like being in this rat race to belong, to prove that I belong through accomplishment and proving to myself that I deserve to live through accomplishment, I'm just trying to just simply like enjoy my day.
You know how I hear that? I want to just tell you what I hear from that, which feels like a very enlightened way to spend time, is attempting to be present, and I'm not particularly good at that. Like, you can ask my boyfriend, like he talks to me and I'm not there. But like, and it's something I feel I need to work on more, like irrespective of what like the shiny sounding goals are. I feel like just what you're describing, to like see and smell the flowers. Oh, there is a bird chirping. Like just these kind of everyday things that it's remarkable to me how much of life is unfolding and I'm not there for, because I'm so anxious about the next thing. And I have this sense now that no matter what the next thing is, no matter what the next goal is that I set, the wiring inside, it's going to follow me wherever I go. And that wiring is always going to be kind of jerking me around and making me disappointed wherever the destination is, because I'm always thinking about the next thing. And so I just, maybe I'm projecting onto you a little bit, Karla, but like, and I say this as a Buddhist, which I am, the practice of being present, I feel it opens up a lot of what might come next, just by way of process.
I have mindfulness is like a big component of this therapy. And so I've been working really hard at it, because at first I could not be alone with myself or quiet. For if there was any silence, I would need to fill it with a podcast, with noise, with a video. I couldn't do it. And now I'm quite comfortable with it. And it took a lot of hard work. And sometimes I'm so startled by my comfort with silence or with quiet or with gentleness that I'm like, did I get a lobotomy? Like, was I lobotomized? Was I lobotomized? I refer to it, and by it, I mean like my newfound comfort with lack of chaos, as I refer to it as my lobotomy. And people close to me know what I mean when I was like, so after my lobotomy, and they know I mean like the last 4 or 5 months, where I've just sort of realized that things don't always have to be in like constant movement in order to be going somewhere.
Wow. Well, we are at the end of this fascinating, inspiring, and learning hour. Thank you so much, Aarti and Karla. Thank you everyone in the audience for joining us tonight. If you enjoyed this author event, please check out our future author events on smcl.org/events. We also appreciate if you could tell us how SMCL did with this program at smcl.org/rate this event. Thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you for the wonderful question. And Karla and Aarti, thank you so much for a really fascinating conversation. Much appreciated.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It was nice to talk to you.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Good night.